I went to school with this girl called Pamela. I didn't like her very much. She wasn't my type. She had a horrible haircut and wore thick makeup all the time. She didn't like the same sort of music as me, and she always wore a black bra under her white school blouse. She wasn't in our clique. Her major cronies were Pat, the ugly girl, and Anne, the class victim. You could always hear them breathing. "Oh, Pammy, you never! What did he do then? Honestly? Really?" We all used to go to the same disco on Fridays, though. It was a small town, and there was nowhere else to go. Pamela was always in a clinch with some unsavoury youth in a dark corner, while we did the latest dances and sneered at the skinheads from Bilton Estate, behind their backs. Eventually, Pamela started to go steady with one of her boys. We didn't know him. He was a bit older than us and had a job at a garage in town. Pammy was seen to be wearing his chrome ID bracelet, which meant they were as good as engaged, or it did when we were 15. Soon it was all over school that they'd done it. Pamela walked about with a knowing smirk, and the toilets were rife with speculation. Then it was the summer holidays. But when we got back, Pamela just wasn't around. Not in school, not at the dance, not in the cafe, not anywhere. At first we didn't miss her. We'd never hung around with her after all. Then one day, Pat burst into hysterics in class for no apparent reason and had to be taken home by a teacher in a car. Well, we were dumbstruck. So we got Anne at break and forced it out of her. Of course, it was all about Pamela. What had happened was this. She had got pregnant by her boyfriend. They used to do it in the park on Friday nights after the disco. Of course, they didn't mention contraception. I suppose he assumed she was on the pill, and she would never have asked him to use a condom, if she even knew what they were. She told him about the baby in the pub they used to go to. He said, "OK, don't worry." Then he said he was going to the gents. But he didn't come back. After a while, Pamela went to look for him at his house, but when she rang the bell, his mother answered, screaming at her, saying she was a whore, a slag, a little bitch, and she needn't think her Jeff was going to marry the likes of Pamela, so she could just bugger off out of it. Pamela cried and begged to see Jeff, but he just hid while his mother slammed the door, so Pamela trailed home alone, sobbing. She knew she couldn't tell her parents. It was impossible, unthinkable, totally out of the question. She sat up awake in her pink bedroom all night. Then, first thing, she packed a duffel bag, went to the bank, got out her savings and caught the coach to London. Though what she thought she'd do there, God knows. She'd never been before. She knew no one. But I suppose we all thought London was the answer to everything, somehow. Well, she wandered about all evening, worn out, terrified and lost, until she found herself in a park. And that made her cry again, thinking of Jeff and how she loved him, despite what he'd done. She sat on a bench, tears pouring down her face, and she knew that there was nothing else for her to do. So, taking a knitting needle out of her bag, she took her knickers down and stuck it hard up inside herself once, twice, until she fainted. A young policeman found her. He picked her up and ran with her to the road. He held her in his arms while the thick blood pumped out of her, soaking his uniform down to his boots. They got her to the hospital just in time. She didn't die. Well, of course, she'd never be able to have children or anything. Her family moved out of town shortly afterwards, went down south. We never saw Pamela again. It was all a long time ago, in the 70s. Things were different then. Probably nowadays she could have an abortion in the hospital, clean and safe. Probably.